Hey, it's James with Forest City Figures, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Street Fighter All Elite Wrestling crossover figures presented by Jazwares. These are GameStop exclusives and are actually based on gear that was worn by the Elite. So let's take a look and see what we've got. So here they are in all their glory, the Elite, the namesake of All Elite Wrestling, based on their Fighter Fest gear. As you can see with these packaging, it is a little bit different from the standard AEW packaging. It does come with an orange metallic border as opposed to the standard gold. You've got your Street Fighter uniform and then the character that each figure is modeled after. On the back of the packaging, you have a photo of the wrestler in their gear as well as the event that they wore it. June 29th, 2019, Fighter Fest AEW, and these are really cool figures. They do have a couple of things that I'm concerned about, but overall, we'll get into that in the pros and cons. But first, let's take a look at the figures. So we will start with the best bout machine, Kenny Omega, who is dressed as Akuma. And basically, you get everything that you could possibly want from this packaging, including a photo of Kenny on the back there with his red hair. And all we can do now is just open it up and take a look. And there he is in all his glory, Kenny Omega, the best bout machine, and he was playing Akuma on this night, and I think this was very well represented. You've got your standard amazing detail in the Kenny Omega tights. You've got the kick pads, the knee pads, and all of the tight details, including his name down the one side. You've got the Omega symbol on the back, and then the tight detail on the right leg. On top of that, you also have the Japanese kanji, as well as the red hair along with the man bun, and that screaming Kenny Omega face that you can use for his pre-match pose. What I like about this figure as well, it does have a very true to form physique for Kenny Omega. He's obviously very ripped, and this figure represents that very, very well. And the articulation on this thing means that you can do pretty much any pose that you can possibly think of, whether it's doing his pre-match finger gun pose or whether you want to pose him doing a V-trigger. It's all very possible because the range of motion on this figure is excellent. So you get a lot with this. It is almost reminiscent of a Mattel Ultimate in the way that the articulation works. And on top of that, as you can see, you get a extra head and 3 sets of hands. So you have your smiling Kenny Omega head if you don't want him screaming all the time on your shelf. And you have 3 sets of hands, which includes the Hadouken hands, as you can see here. Get in focus there. Come on. Come on. There we go. The Hadouken hands. You've got a pair of open hands for if you want Kenny to grip anything. And then, of course, on top of that, you receive a pair of Kenny's signature hands, so you can do his pose pre-match. So you get a lot in a little package. Now, this was slightly higher priced than most AEW figures that I have seen, but it is a GameStop exclusive, and if you have the Edge card with GameStop, you can save a little bit of money. So I believe I saved 10% on this figure, which brought it to about the price of an Elite, and you get the same amount as you would for a WWE Ultimate, which are going for between $40 and $50 if you can find them in stores. One concern I did have about this figure is that when I opened it up, the upper and lower torso were separated, and it is just a ball joint in there, but it does come apart relatively easily. Now, Jazwares is trying to make their figures a little bit easier to pull apart so that you can customize them, and you're seeing that in their Supreme collection, which I will be reviewing at a later date. But just be careful of that. It isn't necessarily broken, but you just may need to be exercising a little bit of extra caution when you're posing these figures. But the best bout machine looks excellent. For what you're getting here, if you're a huge fan of Street Fighter, I would say that this one's a can't miss. There are some concerns with the whole idea of the line, but we'll get into that in the pros and cons. In the meantime, let's get into the Young Bucks. Playing the role of Ken on this day at AEW's Fighter Fest was Nick Jackson of the Young Bucks, and this figure has a lot going on for it, but the only way that we can really appreciate everything that's going on is to get it open, so let's do it. And who's ready for a super kick party? There is Nick Jackson in all his glory, and the first thing I need to say about this figure, and I'm not sure yet if it's a pro or a con, but it was like getting into Fort Knox to open this figure up. And there's a lot going on with this figure, as you can see, dressed like Ken from Street Fighter in the red gi, with the Young Bucks on the back of the jacket there, as well as super kick on the leg, and the signature tassels that the Young Bucks are known for. Now, a few things that I like about this figure right off the bat is the soft goods for the gi. It does come off very easily, so there's the black belt, opens up to reveal details on the tights. But again, this figure was packaged as if it was going to crumble out of the gate, because there was plastic that was surrounding the torso, there was plastic on the arms. Now, I do give Jazwares credit, because a lot of times with soft goods, there is a possibility that you're going to see some sort of dye bleeding off of the soft goods onto the figure. So it's very good that they did put that protective plastic there to prevent the figure from staining. However, it took me 5 minutes to get this figure out of its package, which was a long time. So if you're getting this for a kid, then you'll want to make sure to help them open it up, because otherwise I can see them getting very frustrated and breaking something, which isn't good for a figure out of the package. So you get a lot going on here. You've got Nick Jackson doing that weird face where he kind of looks like he smelled a fart a little bit. You do get, like I said, the soft goods, which come off very easily. I always prefer soft goods for things like this, just because it doesn't need to look too weird. Sometimes soft goods at the scale can be kind of bulky, but with the black belt and the gi jacket, it does look good here. You do get some extras with Nick as well, and we'll take a look at those. So you do get a second head, which is a little bit more of a serious head with a headband. Now, I don't think this headband needed to be soft goods. And again, this was packaged in such a way that I needed to untie the headband in order to pull it out of the package. And it just looks kind of weird, because I had to retie it myself, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, it looks like a helicopter, you know? So the headband probably could have been sculpted plastic in this piece, but at the same time, it does come off, so you don't necessarily have to use it. It is part of the package, but it's not necessarily something that you need to hang on to. So you get two different head sculpts, and then you do get less hands with the Young Bucks than you do with Kenny Omega, but that makes sense because you are getting those soft goods as well. Remember that we need to keep budget into consideration. So you get open hands for Nick, as well as a pair of Hadouken hands, which, if you put them this way, kind of look like Uncle Fester crawling along a table. Or not Uncle Fester, Cousin It, or whatever, you know, the hand from the Addams Family. Anyway, lots going on with this figure. It, again, looks great for what it is. If we pull off the jacket, we can see that Nick Jackson is ready to fight. He looks like he's in ring gear because he is in ring gear, and it's really one of the more plain Young Bucks gears, but it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It just says super kick on the side, and for what it's worth, I mean, it did cost less than the Kenny Omega, which I also thought was weird, because at GameStop, these were between $30 and $35 a piece. I believe the Young Bucks were $33 a piece, and Kenny was $35 without an edge card. But either way, it's interesting to note that there was, you know, the soft goods included with the Young Bucks and an extra pair of hands with Kenny Omega. But you also need to include those extra hands with Kenny Omega so that he can do his signature pose as well. So there's Nick as Ken, and why don't we get into the last one? Matt Jackson as Ryu. Is it Ryu or Ryu? Well, whether it's Ryu or Ryu or whatever you want to say, there he is, Nick Jackson's brother Matt of the Young Bucks, and another great figure. You can tell before we even open this up, if you take a look, you can see that there's plastic that's covering the arms, which again is possibly to prevent any sort of dyeing of the plastic from the soft goods. But again, you get a second head, you get two pairs of hands, and let's open them up and see what you really get. And here we go. Now I'm going to show you a few things here that I didn't show you with Nick. And one of those is the plastic that is protecting the figure from the soft goods. So you see that there's plastic covering both arms as well as the hips. And if we open up the gi, which I will do here for you, so everything is tied in a knot, which is going to be difficult to replicate once again. But one thing to note about this one as well, there is a little bit of extra detail on the black belt. So that's kind of cool. But if we open it up, we can see that there's plastic going all the way up to the top of the lower torso, on these figures. So I don't know if that's protecting that, if it's protecting this from rubbing, or if it's just protecting from fabric bleed. But either way, we'll take the gi off for a second here. We'll take a look at the soft goods in just a moment. But in the meantime, this is part of unboxing these figures, is you need to get all of this plastic off. And sometimes it can be cumbersome. There we go. And there he is. Freed from his plastic prison. Now, speaking of plastic prisons, I did keep this as it was as well. The second head comes in a plastic shell. Now, the problem with that is that, as you can see, the headband is wrapped around a plastic shell as well. So in order to get the headband out, you can pull the head out, no problem. And there's a second, more serious Matt Jackson head. As you can see, this first one is a little goofy. But you get a second, more serious Matt Jackson head there. But the problem becomes, this headband is tied in here. So it would be very easy for someone, if a little kid is opening this, to just disregard the headband and toss it out because they pull the head out too fast. So an odd packaging choice by Jazwares. I kind of get it. You want the headband to not fall off while the figure is in the package, but at the same time, the odds that I'm actually going to be able to retie this onto a head and make it look good are slim to none. It is just a red version of the black belt, so you get one of each, and one is meant to be a headband. But either way, the soft goods on this Ryu cosplay, or Ryu, I'm gonna say Ryu. I've always said Ryu. Have the frayed jacket at the shoulders as opposed to the more neat Ken side, which is more of a clean-cut look. So there are small details where they could have just done a red and a white version of the exact same thing, and very few people probably would have noticed. But if you know Jeremy from Jazwares, you know he's not going to do things with the intent of making them incorrect. So he's doing his best with what he's got, and in this case, Jeremy knocked it out of the park. So you get the white jacket, you get the black belt, which again does have the markings on it. Where are they? There we are. They've got the markings on the black belt. Come on, get into focus. There we go. And then you do get a red headband as well. So these things are good in theory, but in execution they do leave a little bit to be desired, just because it's going to be tough for me to get those back on and make them look natural because of how stiff they are. But that is an issue with soft goods at this scale. The figure, again, looks excellent. The plain white gear does look very good. It's exactly what it's supposed to be. Because, again, this is a Street Fighter cosplay. This isn't a Young Bucks cosplay, right? So you've got the red wristbands. You've got the super kick on the side. You've got all of the articulation you could ask for, including being able to do a picture-perfect super kick. And everything about this figure does scream playability and posability, but also screams adult collectible, and something that I don't mind paying a little bit of extra money for. So with that said, we've opened up the Elite. We've taken a look at all of them in their glory. Why don't we take a look at the pros and cons? Real quick before we get to the pros and cons, one thing I did want to note is that if you do want to do a Hadouken pose, it is possible with the articulation on these figures, which I really appreciate as someone who came up with the Jakks-specific figures that barely move. The fact that you can do a Hadouken pose is definitely a step in the right direction as far as what we'll call articulation science. So great job on that one, Jazwares. And let's take a look at the pros and cons of the Street Fighter All Elite Wrestling Jazwares mashup. And there are quite a few pros, but a couple of cons as well. So on the pro side of things, the detail here is absolutely phenomenal. Head to toe, all three of these figures have had a lot of care put into them, whether it's the differences in the soft goods jackets or making sure to get all of the details right down to Kenny Omega's toes. It's all there, and it's all very, very well done. The articulation is fantastic. There's no real complaints there. Maybe a butterfly joint in the shoulder, but outside of that, everything is where it needs to be to do the poses that you want to do, and you can also make them do pretty much any of the crazy moves the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega like to pull off. Value is also something that I'm very impressed by with this line. AEW and Jazwares, they really want to keep these as affordable as possible. They are still elite style and elite level figures, but the price of elites has gone up, at least where I am, and these are closer to ultimates than they are to elites, so fantastic there. Kudos as well to Jazwares for taking a chance on something as niche as the Street Fighter line would be, because yes, there are Street Fighter fans, yes, there are wrestling fans, yes, there are Young Bucks fans, but the fact that you're going to dial in on all three, that's bold, and it shows that they're willing to go outside of just the standard wrestling figure, which is very refreshing to see those things. It's kind of similar to when Mattel did the Ghostbusters line, and that was a fun idea as well. Character choice as well makes this an easy skip. If you're not into Street Fighter, you don't necessarily need to pick these figures up, because there are so many other Kenny Omega and Young Bucks figures that if you don't want these ones, maybe you don't care about the way they look or you don't care about Street Fighter at all, they are an easy pass. But if you do appreciate both All Elite Wrestling and Street Fighter, these are figures that you'll want to pick up just because they are very well done. On the con side of things, there are a few things that were concerns. The packaging was something that, it got a little bit cumbersome to get some of these figures out of their bubbles just because of the way that they were packaged in there. Once you got them out with the help of some scissors, it was okay, but there were a few things that did slip out. I almost missed one of the headbands because I wasn't even noticing that it was tied into the packaging. So if you're opening these for your kids, make sure that nothing gets left behind. Loose joints, it was really only a concern with the torso on Kenny Omega, but it popped right back into place, and it's not something that's given me a lot of problems since. But outside of that, just keep an eye out. If something does pop off, it's likely that you can reattach it, and it's not necessarily going to cause you major issues. Goofy Young Bucks scans. Now, I know this is just kind of a Young Bucks thing. I find that a lot of their figures have very weird head scans, but that's a weird face. I get it. I'm sure that, Mac Jackson's made that face before. Nick, again, it's depending on the angle, very strange face, but I'm sure, again, that the Young Bucks have made those faces. I just like that they've also included a neutral, for lack of a better term, face scan that you can put on there as well if you prefer. On the con side, while I did give Jazwares points for taking chances, this is a very niche theme, and for something that's showing a lot of stock at every GameStop that I've been to, they could be sitting there for a while. This is something that's very specific, as I did mention with the pros side of things, and if they sit for a long time, it could hurt the perception of the AEW Jazwares line, even though this is a GameStop exclusive. So if you're seeing a lot of these on shelves, it's because there was a lot ordered and they were expecting a lot of anticipation for this line, and they are fantastic figures. Hopefully they don't get clearanced out. I don't want to see the value of these figures go down over time, but that is something that could be a little bit of an issue going forward. With these niche themes, they should be done in smaller runs to avoid things of that nature. So what do you think of the All Elite Wrestling Street Fighter crossover figures? Do you have them in hand? Do you plan to pick them up? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for more reviews. My name is James for Forest City Figures. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and have a great rest of your day.